Hello everybody, can you hear me back there? Great. I'm Dave Zavoral, class of 1996. I will now be known as the brother of the guy in the video up there. That's right. I had nothing to do with it, but I was sure happy to watch that. Tonight I'm going to share a few stories of my side of memories that I have with Mr. Meyer. They barely scratch the surface of the lives that he's touched over 4 decades here at Sacred Heart. So, first one I'd like to talk about was when I was a freshman. Back then, according to the video, they use the intercom quite a bit now, but back then we didn't. He would just come into the classroom, like they saw in the video, open the door, survey, point, pull you out of class. Yeah, I know. It's kind of intimidating when you're a freshman. That's how it works. So we walked down to his office, and I didn't get called to the principal's office very much, but so I was kind of confused what was going on. Why are you laughing, Father? Anyway. So we get into his office, which, is about the size of this stage. His old office in the old school is about this size, plus a desk and a chair and him in there. So we're all in this little tight room, and we start talking a little bit, and it quickly turns to football, and it turns to the wishbone offense. So we're going through blocking schemes on where I'm supposed to be on certain plays. And I must answer them right, because we went from blocking to the 3-point stance, and how to properly take your first step out of the 3-point stance. He gets out of his chair and he pushes it in. He gets down in his office and shows me his first step. So here I am, against the wall. And he's in there doing these, pretty, powerful moves. He was always a good coach. Even when he wasn't my coach, he was still coaching us in the office there. The second memory I want to share with you is some of our lunchroom memories. Now, I think we're in trouble, actually, because if you were over there running that line tonight, we would have been through a lot quicker. In the old school, you guys probably close your eyes, you could remember the big Pepsi machine that was always glowing down in there. He would walk between the kitchen and the hallway, keeping us all in order. He would go through the same body postures that we saw in the video, with the straightening out his jacket and his tie and putting the necklace on top of his eye. All in proper order, which, we've grown to love and expect from him. They brought up a saying in the video, and it's the same saying that sticks with me. He would say, "All right, people, let's make a reasonable facsimile of a line." And I took Sarah's advice, and I looked it up last night, and it means a method. Only makes sense. I've actually used that saying before, reasonable facsimile of line, and I got the same blank stare. So I just agreed. Another story that you might appreciate is when I was a senior. Again, I got called into his office, and we were talking a little bit, and he turned around, and on his bookshelf he pulled off this book. It was called Understanding the Cosmos. It was a pretty thick book. And some of my high school teachers are here. They probably remember I wasn't much of a reader back then. I do appreciate it now for you guys. Thanks for sticking with me. But back then I wasn't much of a reader. So he's like, "You should take this book, and bring it back when you're done with it." So I took the book. And I showed it to my best friend Ben at the time, and he just laughed. He's like, "He really gave you this book?" I'm like, "Yeah, he gave me this book. What am I going to do with this book? I don't even understand the captions underneath the picture." But he did say, "Bring it back when I was done with it." Well, 2 days later, I was done with it. any plans of reading this thing. So I brought it back in, and I gave it to him, and he stops, dead in his tracks. And he says, Mr. Zavoral, either you did not read this book, or I have totally underestimated you. My wife laughed that much last night when I told her. Some of the more meaningful things that Mr. Meyer has left with me is 6 years of prayer, daily prayer. Planting the seeds of meditative prayer that he did back then are still some of the things that I use on a daily basis now. It took me more than a few years to get into the habit of it, but thank you for planting that seed. I encourage you, all you teachers, to continue doing that. Mr. Meyer was also the first person to ever tell me about abortion. He used to talk about it on a regular basis, and he used to talk about the Roe v. Wade case. I had never heard any of these things before. And today, now, it's become one of my passions, the pro-life movement, the dignity of life. And I thank you for bringing those up. When I was 26 years old, I was elected to the school board, and they told me I was the youngest member ever. I was right out of college, and I came back, and I sat alongside Mr. Meyer in these meetings. You know, now we were equals, right? So watching him in some of these meetings, which ended up getting long at times, I would just, out of the corner of my eye, observe him, and he would keep his things in a tight order, his papers, his calendar, and on top of it was his Bible. And I had never noticed this before, but his Bible was the most worn, taped together, marked up Bible that I had ever seen. And it's like the scales fell off of my eyes, and I realized where this man got all the wisdom that we're talking about tonight. It's from his prayer, it's from his study of Scripture. And I realized he was not just the authority figure that I had seen throughout all of my high school years. This guy was a servant. He was a servant. He was God's servant. And he followed God's call for 35 years. The length of my life, I'm 35. He's been following God's call for 35 years. As was custom back in the old AI Mirth, back before we had the tile floor and stuff. That's right, you guys remember. Few of you remember. It was custom for Mr. Meyer to go through the visiting rooms, the visiting locker room before we could go in there. Well, one day, somebody had written on the board in the visiting locker room, the team that said, "Sacred Heart sucks." And I don't know how it came to me, but we talked about this. He talked to me about that saying. And, you know, when I was 17, my brain wasn't fully developed. That's what it didn't really register with me, you know. Yeah, we did have a pretty sticky basketball team, so it made sense. But no, it was a lot deeper to him than that. They were talking about the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And he said this thing, he was in sorrow over what was written. And it wasn't for us as a team. It was for that person's lack of understanding of the love of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And I finally realized that yesterday when I was thinking back on this. That he really cares. Just like you guys thought for all night. He cares. Not only about us as his students, but everybody else that came into this building, whether they were a visiting opponent or not. He had genuine respect for them. In 1 John chapter 4, verse 8, it says, "For those who do not know love do not know God, for God is love." Everything that God is, his whole identity, his whole being, is described in the word love. And for many of us, we simply take love as feelings. But God has shown us that love is a lot more than just feelings. That love is sacrifice, and that He sacrificed His life for us on a cross. That is the truest form of love. And I think when we sit here tonight, and I'm so glad to see all of you that came out, the reason we're here is because we recognize that there's a guy in our midst that loves Sacred Heart with the truest form of love, which is sacrifice, which He has poured out for us for 35 years. So I thank you for that, and God bless.